Hey everyone, I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes since we still have people signing on. So just hold on for a few more minutes. All right, I think we can get started now. So welcome to this evening's staff meeting. Today's agenda is listed here, and I'll let Katie take it from here now. Katie, you're muted.
Before we vote to approve the agenda, I'd like to take a roll call of the panel members. When I call your name, please just say here. Can they unmute themselves, Anna?
Yeah, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, so please unmute yourself and say here. Jeff Gardner. Hi, Jeff.
Here.
Hi, Jeff. Dave Gigliotti. Dave Gigliotti. Okay. Mike McGivney.
I saw him on here.
Me too. Mike McGivney. Oh, I see you. Okay, you're here. Jerry Shy.
Here.
Okay. Manuel Souza. Okay. Bob Smith. Roger Tellier.
Here.
Richard Pastor. Edward Triano.
Here.
Ken Murgo. John McDonald.
Here.
Brendan Vika.
Here.
Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 panel members, which makes a quorum. Next, if any panel member would like to make a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting.
I can make a motion to approve the agenda.
Do we have
I'll,
a second?
I'll second it, see if nobody else can get the things to work.
Thanks, Jerry. Okay. All in favor? I'll just go down the list. All in favor to approve tonight's agenda? Jeff Gardner? Okay. Mike McGivney?
Yes.
Jerry Shy?
Yes.
Roger Tellier?
Yes.
Ed Triano?
Yes.
John McDonald?
Yes.
Brennan Bika?
Yes.
Okay. That motion passes unanimously. Moving on, we will go to the first item on the agenda, aquaculture application, Boringer and Lundgren. I think Ben, you take it from here.
I'll just make the quick announcement again about, the virtual participation. Just please keep yourselves muted. As we all know at this point, just keep yourselves muted just to keep the background noise down. Great. All right, thank you.
Okay. All right, great. You got the slide up? Yeah, so this is can everybody hear me first of all? Yes, good. This is an application. It's in the town or off the shores of Tiverton. It is just north of Sepauwett Point. And it's about 400 feet offshore from the coastline there. As you can see, it's about 3 acres. It did a survey on this site during the PD, and that was I think early last fall, in the fall of 2020, and did quite a few samples with the tongs, and only found one quahog, so it only came out to about less than 1 per square meter. There wasn't anything else really of interest in the samples. It was kind of a mix of rocks and shelly black mud. The one quahog I did find was on the larger side, more like a cherry, chowder size, and it looked a little beat up. It had holes in it and things like that, but it was still alive. I have received only maybe 2 objections on this. One was an objection to floating gear in general. It wasn't specific really to the application. The other one was just a request for a public hearing, but didn't mention the reason for objecting. As you can see in this map, the site is intentionally located outside of the recreational shellfishing layer as depicted on the DEM marine fisheries map. And it's certainly in water deeper than you could short stick in. And as I said, there wasn't much of a quahog resource found there. DEM has no objections with the site. We've worked with the applicant on this, DEM and CRMC, on citing the coordinates. And as I mentioned, it's about 400 feet offshore. So there's plenty of room to navigate around it if one does want to access the nearshore area. And it is, I think, about 300 feet from the existing lease, which you can see in red. It's the Carl Berg lease. That application received no objections as well from the SAP during its review. Yep, and as I said, one of the main point of interest perhaps of this application that it is for floating gear. They propose using floating cages and trays, kind of various sizes, and using some bottom cages to grow out the scallops. But the bulk of the gear there would be floating gear. I believe the applicants are on the call here. I'm happy to answer Any questions, or if you'd like, we could hear from the applicants.
Does any member of the SAP have any question or comment about this application?
Katie, I have not on this particular one, but as far as the Antivodin, Secundit and all that, future, what's the future look like as far as all the new, sites going to pop up? Because I guess I have a call the other day about, from fishermen, conch fishermen I know, and they were concerned that it's going to grow because I guess the ponds are full. I was just curious what the forecast is, because I guess they're going to be concerned pretty soon if it stretches out. You know more about the conch grounds on that side, Katie.
I'm actually not very super familiar with this specific area, but I do see that Josh Soares is on the call. Josh, do you have any comments or anything to say about this area?
I mean, we do work in there. I guess, we can work around it, but, I'd definitely be concerned about expansion, like in the future. It's not, we fish all through there, but it's not like, I guess we can fish around it, but I'm definitely concerned about, going forward, in the river in some areas, especially like, in Sepauwett. I know there's one that went in shallow in the cove, but like out in the deeper water there, if anywhere to pop up would be a huge concern for me. So hopefully, I don't know, you can work around stuff, but.
Well, I'd say those are helpful comments, and I've got another item on the agenda here that we'll be presenting after the review of this application, which may speak more to future planning for aquaculture in the Secundit River and in Narragansett Bay. So be interested in hearing some of your feedback on when we get there. Yeah.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks.
If there are no other comments or questions, would any of the panel members like to make a motion on this application?
Katie, it's Ed Triano. I'll make a motion not to object to the lease proposal.
Okay, I'll give Anna a second to type it up on the screen here. While she's typing it up, Jeff, I am monitoring the chat, so if it would be easier for you just to type, I will make sure everyone gets your message. So if you want to just type in whatever you have to say.
If you're looking for a second, Katie, I'll second it if Josh is okay with it over there.
Yeah, I'm all right with it.
Okay, so Jeff said, wondering if Ben could give his item as it is very relevant. I think it's
the next item on
it's
the agenda.
yeah.
So
So
yeah, I will be speaking shortly on this. Yeah.
Yeah, can I ask Ben a question?
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Ben, is this in the area that it's 3 acres or less that the leases can be?
Yes, technically this would be above that was it 41 degrees, 35 minutes. North of that line, in Narragansett Bay, it says leases are limited to 3 acres. That's correct. This is above that line. However, it is in the Sakonnet River. I think if a future application for expansion came up, you know, we would have to address whether that regulation also applies to the Sakonnet River. And it's certainly something that could be clarified, you know, as we discuss the next item.
Thank you.
But yeah, to be clear, that line, for all's benefit, there is a regulation within the CRMC coastal program that any aquaculture lease north of 4135 is limited to 3 acres in size. So.
Okay, can you all see the screen?
Yes, it's not in the full screen mode, but we can see it, so.
Yeah, to edit it, I have to have it like this, unfortunately, so.
Jeff has a question. He was wondering if the next item is concerning floating gear.
It concerns all aquaculture in general, but this is part of it.
And Dennis Erkin has a comment. The regulation north of that line, when first developed, was intended to include the Sakonnet. So I think that reiterates Ben's comment earlier.
I've not found indication of that in the record, but I would understand if that were the case. I think it is something that needs to be clarified.
Okay, if there are no other comments or discussion on the motion, I will move to a vote. Starting from the top. Hold on, let me get you, Jeff Gardner. I'll get you on my thing here. Jeff Gardner, you can just raise your hand. Okay. Yay. Dave G. Oh, no, not here. Sorry. Mike McGivney.
Yes, not to object. Is that what we're voting?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I guess I'll read the motion. Hold on 1 second. The motion that we're voting on is to recommend to CRMC that the aquaculture activities proposed in the application is consistent with competing uses engaged in the exploitation of marine fisheries. Okay. Next, Jerry Shy.
Yes.
Okay. Roger Tellier.
Yes.
Edward Triano.
Yes.
John McDonald.
Yes.
Brennan Bika.
Yes.
Okay. And if there are any other panel members that have come in since I've done the roll call, please speak now. Okay. So the motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Can you see the screen? Yep, okay. I'll hand it back to Ben.
All right. So now that we've teed that one up, I'm here also today to talk about the status of the Bay Special Area Management Plan, known as the SAMP. CRMC has done a number of SAMPs for Rhode Island. It is something we are kind of known for, I guess. The most famous one is the Ocean SAMP, which helped facilitate the siting and development of the wind farm off Block Island. Some of you may have been involved in that previous process. It's a very public process, as you know. Likewise, the Bay SAMP is designed to be similar. The initiative for the SAMP really first came about not because of aquaculture, though that was intended to be part of it, but it was the submerged cable that would be coming in from the Revolution Wind offshore wind energy area and coming into state waters and then up the West Passage to Quonset. So that part of the SAMP has already been kind of done. It's not been put into regulation, but we've had the working groups for that part of the SAMP. And likewise, the aquaculture element of the Bay SAMP will follow a similar process. And so let me just give you a little bit about what that is. So the purpose of this is to develop an aquaculture element for the Bay SAMP. And this is to guide the development of aquaculture through the CRMC regulatory process while minimizing its effects on the natural resources and existing uses within Narragansett Bay. Basically, we're going to do this by establishing an ad hoc working group made up of key stakeholders with the purpose of helping CRMC review the existing information and advising on the development of a CRMC aquaculture SAMP map. So one of the main intended products of this SAMP is a map. And similar to how they did the OSAMP, we're going to be looking at all the existing information, looking for gaps in that information, filling them in best we can through a wide stakeholder process. We've reached out to some of you already as we've been kind of having very preliminary one-on-one discussions with various stakeholder groups. But I wanted to let you know the wider membership of the SAP and the MFC, for that matter, know that this is something we are working towards. We are, like I said, still in the internal kind of phase of developing this, fleshing out our working group members and a schedule for meeting. We do expect to have something public in the coming few months, and hopefully have some kind of plan in a finalized form, more or less, by the end of this year or early next year. I'll have to see how that goes. Of course, the world we live in now has made public meetings maybe not more difficult, but just different. So we're going to have to adapt maybe some of our processes to this new Zoom platform, or hopefully we might be able to hold in-person meetings maybe this summer. Who knows? We'll have to wait on the governor to get word on that. But the map is intended to identify the preferred aquaculture development areas within Narragansett Bay and the Sakonnet River. So the geographic scope of this plan is not all of Rhode Island state waters, but essentially, the mouth of the bay, from Point Judith to Beavertail to Brenton, all those points north, basically the parts of the state waters that the OSAMP didn't consider. And the map essentially will be incorporated into the Red Book regulations, the CRMC regulations, and into the aquaculture chapter. We're going to be looking at a lot of different kinds of data, as well as the data that was collected during the submerged energy cable corridor working group. So we already have a lot of kind of benthic and biological data from that. And some of the other things we're going to do is develop also guidance for aquaculture gear selection, perhaps, if not standards or regulations for that. So in that sense, we may end up creating different standards or guidance for floating aquaculture of various sizes. And we may actually, have different standards for different size gear. These are all things to be determined. I'm just kind of giving you hypothetical examples of some of the things that we might come out of this process. Other than that, right now we are, we're going to be looking at the existing uses. So, we have the natural resource data which we're going to be working closely with DEM and others on. But then there's also, of course, the human uses, which are sometimes harder to determine sometimes. But, we're going to be looking at, harbor plans, mooring fields, navigation channels, turning basins, anchorages, special anchorages areas. We'll be looking at access points and rights of ways, state parks, also, where, launching ramps and other things might be located, other infrastructure. Of course, historic resources, which, shipwrecks and the like. It does pose a little bit of an issue because most of that information is not made public, but we're going to try to figure out how to incorporate it anyway. Of course, the existing aquaculture will be considered in this. So there may be areas that have seen, aquaculture development that may be, targeted as areas where aquaculture should not be further developed. And of course, areas of, recreational fishing, commercial fishing, commercial shell fishing, swimming areas, public access areas, recreational areas, and things like that. And of course, things like eelgrass beds and the like. We'll probably be looking at traffic patterns based on marine vessel traffic. So we got a lot of information that we're collecting, and the whole idea is to put this together on a map and create a plan for where aquaculture can be accommodated in the bay and where maybe it cannot, or it would be at least strongly discouraged, if not prohibited. And the idea with this is that we would create a preferred area, much like we did with the cable corridor. With the cable corridor, we created a preferred energy corridor for the cable to be laid. Now, what that tells the developer is that, well, they could apply outside that corridor, outside the preferred area, but they would be on notice from the very beginning that that application would have a number of problems that had already been kind of sussed out through the SAMP process, right? So it'd be a much, much higher bar for an applicant to get an approval applying outside of a preferred area. The idea is that these areas would be vetted so that we would have some understanding that it would be consistent with the other uses, whether it be fishing, shell fishing, particular concern to you folks, or of the many other uses in the bay, commercial traffic and recreation and the like. So, like I said, this is very early on in the process. This is probably the first public meeting that I've presented this. So you guys are kind of one of the first to know. And I just wanted to, invite and welcome you into this process as it goes forward, because we would value your contribution and knowledge of the bay. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Mike?
Yeah, Ben, just for everybody's, let them know that we asked for this about 4 or 5 years ago. Dale Levitt had an aquaculture class over in Bristol, and about 150 people showed up for it. And we had great concern about the number of people that might be trying to get into this business and not having the knowledge of the bay. So we've asked for this to help the aquaculturists, but to protect the shell fishermen. We have parts of the bay that are critical to us for the wild harvest. And in the past, we've had aquaculture leases that, regardless of who objected or whatever, they went the full course. So it was our idea that we identify the beds that are important to the commercial shell fishermen and protect these beds from having aquaculture leases. So we're happy that we're finally get to this. And it took windmills in a corridor to electric cable to do it, but we're happy that we're finally at this phase. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, I very much appreciate the conversations we've already had about this. Your opinion is valued. Well, if nobody has any other questions, I'm happy to relinquish the floor so you can continue with your business.
I just actually have one comment about this process. I'm glad that this is finally happening. I know people have been asking for it for a while, but I just want the facilitators of the SAMP to be on the record saying this, but the timing of starting this process isn't ideal. If you would like full stakeholder involvement, I mean, this time of year, most fishermen are really trying to getting their season going and it'll be ramping up throughout, the next couple of months. So just take that into consideration when you're doing your meeting planning and scoping and all of the things, because honestly, I feel like this would be better suited for a winter project. But if it has to be done within your timeline, it has to be done. But just take into consideration that getting people together and all, being able to participate might be a little bit more difficult in the summer months than it would be in, say, January or February. So that's all.
Understood. That's a good point, Katie. Yeah, the timing of this wasn't within my own control personally, and I understand your concerns. My only hope is that maybe that now that we've all kind of adapted, or not, but we all seem to be here tonight, to the Zoom platform, hopefully that will allow some flexibility for folks to be able to participate without having to rearrange their whole day. If we can, try to do these meetings in within hours that work for folks. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I've been on meetings though with some fishermen, and they're on their boat fishing, literally, and they're still participating. So yeah, and I do appreciate the extent people do go through to work with CRMC in that way. But I'll certainly keep that in mind as we go forward.
Yeah, maybe also offer if we do ever go back to the in-person meetings, maybe just offer, a virtual option for, an alternate meeting, or have a virtual option for that meeting.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to get rid of the virtual option. I think it's here to stay. Yeah, along with working from home even. I mean, it's a new world we're in. But yeah, that said, I will do my best to try to accommodate folks, and certainly, this forum is useful in that it meets somewhat regularly, and I'm usually here, and I hope that's one way I can keep everyone informed of this process going forward. And if you ever want to, invite me back and put me on the agenda to discuss this more as things develop, I'm always happy to do so. And likewise, if anyone wants to reach out to me on a personal level, my virtual door is always open. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Ben, for that. So we will keep moving along to the next agenda item here. So the third item on the agenda is going over and voting on the Providence River harvest schedule. So, and since the last SAP meeting that we had in April, I have received some good feedback and this list of proposals here that all the SAP members have hopefully had a chance to look at. I know I've been emailing you up until yesterday afternoon with new proposals that have been coming in. But we'll just start by going through this list. I'll just kind of read off these options, and then we can have further discussion on what's presented here. So the first proposal I received was to open the area Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so 3 days a week for 4 hours from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. at a 6 bushel limit. So that calculates out to 26 days per year. There was no specification for doing a safest monitored closure. So this would be specifically for 26 days. There were no specified start and end dates. So we can discuss this further too. The next option was to open 2 or 3 days a week. It wasn't specified which days, but again, also a 4-hour opening from 8 a.m. to 12. And it was suggested either a 4 bushel limit, which brings you to 39 days, or a 6 bushel limit, which would give you fewer days, so 26 days a year. And again, no specified start and end dates. This is something we can discuss at the end of this. Then RISA came up with a proposal with specific dates. So they would like to see a 3-hour-a-day opening starting at 7, closing at 10 a.m., also with a 6 bushel limit. And these are the days that they specified, which came out to a total of 38 days. When I double checked, just a note, when I double checked the numbers based on the harvest limit and number of hours open, it came to a little over what our criteria would require. So we'd have to adjust that a bit to 27 days. Also, another note is, another note is that I think trying to start in May would be nice, but I think that's a little soon. I think we're looking more at June just so we could get all the updates and changes in the regs completed on time. So that might be a little early for us. All right, the fourth option was to open 2 days a week through Labor Day from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., another 4 hours, and another at 6 bushels. And then after Labor Day, going down to 1 day a week for 8 a.m. to 12, so another 4 hours at this, keeping the 6 bushel limit per day until the quota is reached at 2 million clams. Number 5 is another 6 bushel per day limit with a 4-hour opening. There was no preference on the number of days per week, but they'd like to see safest tracking used to decide when to close. And then our final proposal was to open Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 3 hours per day, another 6 bushel limit until Labor Day. That brings us to 27 days per year. No safest tracking, but to survey and see what impact the openings have had. So across all of these proposals, everyone preferred to see a 6 bushel limit, which makes sense because you want to make it worthwhile your time when you're up there. So, so it's nice to see everyone coming to agreement, it seems so far, on the setting this limit as a 6 bushel limit per day. It also seemed like the 8 to 12 opening was pretty ideal. I know RISA says 7 to 10. So we have a variety in options here, and we can either work with the set number of days based on the simulation that gives us our bushel limits, number of hours open, and then that equates out to the number of days per year open. But we can also bring in an alteration where marine fisheries can monitor the information being entered into SAFES to see where we're at in relation to the 2 million clam limit. And once we get really close to that limit, we closely monitor until we reach the limit and then close it down. So this option could be beneficial in that you wouldn't technically lose out days to, say, there's a ring closure in the area. So the only thing that you have to think about is in our simulation, we predicted about 100 participants coming in and harvesting. So if we underestimated that number and there's a higher harvest effort coming in, then that might shorten the number of days. So that's something to keep in mind. But if we underestimated that, it could actually extend the number of days open, on top of not losing out days to rainfall. So I hope everyone's had some time to discuss these options between each other. And I have, just so you know, a couple other slides just for our reference as we go through and discuss these. I have included this table that I sent out to everyone, but I've also added in the calculations for the bushel weight of 2 bushels per hour, which now you can incorporate for the 3-hour opening that a couple of people have proposed. So now you can see if you're wanting a 6 bushel limit per day, that gives you a 2 bushel per hour harvest rate. And then the number of hours open is 3. So that gives you a total of 27 days open per year. So we have this for reference. We can come back to this. And I've also included just have a calendar up so we can kind of get a sense working back from, say, everyone seems to think we want to close sometime around Labor Day. So we can just kind of refer to this calendar and work backwards, or based on a start date, work forward and figure out what we're looking at in terms of what the opening season would be. So with that, I'll open it up for questions, comments. Yes, Mike.
Yeah, the schedule we put forward assumed and that there's going to be some rain events. Generally, the half-inch, as we know with Greenwich, is quite often for the closure of 7 days. It's usually in the 50 to 70% range. So the idea of laying out the dates assumed that we're going to miss quite a few of these days. So I thought it would be easier for everyone to understand that if there are closures and we get extended into the summer, that we use up to 27 days that are allotted with this schedule. The guys talked it over about the different hours. I think everybody's on board with the 6 bushels. The idea, but the 3 hours is that it will hopefully reduce the number of people that take the day off to fish the area, and more of the full timers will get access to this area and it won't be glutted with other fishermen. And that the 3 hours will reduce the catch. Not everybody will be getting 6 bushels, and hopefully the safest system will reflect that. So we'll be getting more days than 27. A couple of the days that I put in there, we wanted to try to get before Memorial Day. I know the dealers, I spoke to 3 dealers and they supported this plan. Mars, Twin Shellfish, and American Mussel. And basically, I know it's a tight schedule. If May 3rd is the MFC, you'd have 3 days to get the director to sign whatever regulation we have for the 20-day time it takes. So we could get in before Memorial Day. And that's always an important time. We were a little aggressive on the number of days, just knowing that we're going to lose a lot of days. We know through Greenwich that, you get a Monday in, you get a Wednesday, and it rains, and you can't go back till next Friday. And just, it's the way of the world. Half-inch is just a bad thunderstorm in Providence. So we thought that the 3 hours was good for the full timers. It gives them effort, time up there. It's not the easiest place to dig. And the dates are laid out. There is one date, the 4th of July. The 5th of July is a Monday, which is a holiday. So we didn't want to have it open that day. So we put in July 6th. So it would be Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday that week, something we do with Greenwich. So we just kind of think this reflects the idea of getting the most access. It's only 9 hours a week, but I think it'll benefit the full timers, but give us as many days in there as we can get. So that's why we supported this. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. That makes sense. Are you thinking then putting in, so when this goes into reg, since you have 38 days, you would say, for example, okay, it opens the 26th of May and it then extends out 26 or 27 days from there. So that would probably bring us sometime into one of these dates in mid-August. So all of those days would be open, but if one of those days is closed to rain, then we just extend out to that next date and we keep doing that.
Yeah, it's what we do with Greenwich. That's how we
Yeah.
work Greenwich. It's
Yep.
basically, you have
Yep.
the days there so people know, oh, if it's open, it's, that's the date it's open. So
Yep.
that was the idea of that. And we're hoping that, you can use Safest to maybe we get more days out of it than the 27 because of the less time that we're going to have up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. I see Jared has his hand up.
Yeah, just to throw it out there, if you're using Safest, I work the 2 no matter what. And I think a lot of guys are going to work afterwards. So if you do go fishing afterwards, all those clams they catch, not in the Providence River, will be counted as being taken out of the Providence River. If you're going by Safest. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. So if you work there till 11 o'clock, and then I go work, say, Barron Beach, I get another 2 bushel, let's just say, it's a good day. But that extra amount would, if you're using Safest, because you only give 1 tag to the deal.
It's a separate, Providence River is a separate tagging area. So it won't be associated with like Upper Bay 1A, 1B. It'll be tagging area 16.
Yeah, but it will be counted against it because it only counts for one. It'll only count for 1 tag for the day.
So Jared, just out of curiosity, so you're saying that when fishing different tagging areas in a given day, it doesn't get sorted out as such. It all gets assigned to one regardless. Yeah,
because if I go into Greenwich, like a lot of times I work in Greenwich, and then I go somewhere else afterwards. It only counts as one. Everything will count as Greenwich on Safest because I'll give them that tag unless I give it Section A because I did work Section A. Let's say, I don't know. It depends on what the dealer wants to put it as. So I'm just letting you know this. If that's going to happen.
So that's super helpful. And what we can do is make sure that promote for the dealers to tag specifically. I think we assume that the tagging is done reflective of where it's harvested, but if the dealers are not tagging to the individual locations as where it's harvested, then that's something that we can stress to them.
Yeah, that won't happen because you put everything on one slip. They're not going to run your stuff separately, 2 different slips. That doesn't happen. I'm throwing that out there. I don't know. That's how it is.
No, I appreciate the feedback.
Hey, Mike, can I ask a quick question on your proposal, if you don't mind?
Go ahead.
So just thinking out loud, I guess just my 2 cents would be that I think you could structure it like we have for Greenwich now, where you run like the first 27 days and say if any of those are closed, we would open these subsequently, kind of like how we do in Greenwich. I guess the alternative, I think the evaluating will be harder in a more structured system like this. I think if it was just my 2 cents, if we had something where we had starting this day, the area is open, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, until the trigger is hit, then I think that would probably provide the needed flexibility to be more adaptive to in both directions of harvest very fast or for closure days, and allowing to extend beyond the 3rd, even if it was a really wet year. Does that make sense?
Well, the structure was set up with what you gave us for the number of days. If you need to put language in there, if you feel more comfortable saying that 27 days will be allowed of this schedule, and then after that, it'll be reevaluated, so this whole schedule might not be realized, that would be fine. We just put it together with the thought that we knew the 27-day was the max, and we know there's going to be rainfall. I mean, last year, I think it rained all of June and early July, and then it didn't rain a lick after that. So if you feel more comfortable with language that states the 27 days and reevaluate, then that'd be fine. It's just, we thought it'd be helpful to kind of lay out the season.
Yeah, and I mean, that makes sense to me. I'm just thinking, just thinking through if we got to set. So I think like if you had the schedule of May 26th to September 3rd, with some of those days being contingent, that would be like Greenwich. I think it will be hard for us to be adaptive on the 3rd to then say whether we can keep it open or closed beyond that, based on like in terms of the language that would allow for that and how we would default. You know what I mean? We'd have to come up with another regulation that says, you know, if we still have not hit a trigger and we've exhausted through the 3rd, then this is what would happen. Whereas I think I feel like options 4 and 2 probably allow for a little bit more dynamic management like we do for finfish.
Well, we actually did Greenwich December schedule similar to this, where we had a clock ticking, and if certain number of days weren't realized, we added those days. So, I mean, this is not something foreign to how we manage an area. So I think what we were trying to accomplish here, we're trying to maybe light a little fire under the process to get access prior to Memorial Day weekend, which is a very important weekend. And, you know, we support language that after 27 openings, we'd have to reevaluate or so, but I just thought it was helpful that we kind of laid out the schedule for everybody. Right, we did do this for December where we added days if certain days weren't realized.
I see Jerry has a question. Go ahead, Jerry.
Am I unmuted? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I just first of all, I'm pretty disappointed. I mean, we've been working on this forever, and I kept getting reassurances from everybody that this was going to be no problem with getting it all approved in the time manner that we were hoping. To find out we're not going to be able to do that till June now, a little disappointing to hear. But anyway, Connor, you made a comment about the not using the schedule that Mike set forth, and once you hit that trigger, you're going to close it anyway. So what difference does it make how the schedule is here?
It doesn't say that in Mike's proposal, I don't think. So that's what I guess I was suggesting. But if there was another clause in there that said if you hit the trigger, then yes, then that's fine too.
Then I make a motion to add that clause.
I actually changed my view from the 4 hours to the 3 hours. I like the schedule, but not the 7 o'clock. I like 8 to 11.
I can do that.
If I may, we came up with the 7 o'clock one. We all know Greenwich opens at 8 during the winter. That's because the sunrises are usually around 7 in the morning and it's cold and everybody needs a little time to warm things up and to get out there. When this area is going to be open, the sunrise is going to be at 5:20 in the morning. Half the diggers, more than half the diggers are out by 6. So we knew 6 was too early, 6 to 9. So basically that was kind of splitting the difference, that 7 to 10 allowed the guys to get out there before maybe the bay gets heavily traveled during the summer. And just if they want to go fish afterwards, they can. But it was just, there's a lot of sunlight in the morning during the summer, and we thought 7 o'clock was a reasonable time.
Okay. Jerry, do you have another question?
No, did I not take it down? Sorry.
That's okay. Brenna, go ahead. Or Brennan. sorry.
Hey, it's okay. I'm just, is it 7 to 10 or is it 7 to 11? It says 3 hours a day.
Sorry, which one?
Option 3. It says 7 to 10, but it says 3 hours a day. Oh, I'm so sorry. I read that wrong. Completely wrong. Very sorry.
No problem.
Connor, if I may, I understand that this you have to put the regulations in order to give them to the director and for her to sign them. And there's a 20-day period that they have to be there. You don't think that if the regulations are realized, you couldn't get in 2 days to the director for her to sign them, so we could get Memorial Day weekend in? I mean, this industry had a really tough time, and this is a big holiday, and it looks like it might be a good holiday given the progress we're having with COVID and everything. And I know every dealer I talk to can't get enough product for Memorial Day weekend. So, I mean, is there a chance to, to get this so we can get that weekend prior to Memorial Day weekend in?
Yeah, so just to clarify, so the council meeting's May 3rd, and basically we have to have this filed, not just her decision, but all the language into the system basically by the 6th. And so, the 2 days to get that done, or 3, we will work our best to do so. I'm just trying to think through when that 20-day clock is hit, and whether we can get it into the system in time for the 26th, the 28th. I guess to Jerry's earlier comment, I mean, I fully anticipate that it will be available June 1. I'm just trying to tease out whether it will be available the week prior to Memorial Day. That's really what.
I'll let the director know that it's really important if it's available to have it before the Memorial Day weekend, and maybe that can move the process along.
Yeah, and I'll also be conveying that to her. It's just trying to, that's something that we will work towards. I think it's just trying to do our best, and also trying to set the realistic expectations. So our hope will be for an expeditious reg implementation, but if I guess the thought is that if we didn't get it in at that point, like the other days in your list would trigger as well, right? Because they wouldn't be close to water, but you wouldn't have access to those days.
Yeah, the schedule we'd want to move forward on. It's just that particular week is, it kicks off the summer, and usually a very good demand. So, I mean, that'd be the best time to open it if we're, trying to marry the demand with production.
Yep.
Jerry, you got your hand raised?
Yes, I do. I have a question. With there's a proposal there about using the survey to monitor how things are going. What's the likelihood of that actually coming to fruition, that we could, as we're digging, Dennis can do his thing with the dredge, and if there's very little impact as far as the numbers, because a lot of us disagree with the number. What's the chances that that can be extended? Is there any chance at all to that? Or are you just that this is the way it's going to be this year?
I can answer that, Jerry. I think ultimately we would use the survey to assess what the stock looks like this year, but not so much to be adaptive for like the September 1/3 time period. Like we'll monitor it as well this year, but the information would be more so used in the subsequent year as opposed to inform 2021 opening.
Will that information be to us as well, like with the surveys? It's just to see how things are going.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I may follow up on Jerry's point, who's going to be in charge of counting the people and kind of keeping an eye on what's going on? You've had a certain number that you're using as a baseline, 100 participants. I mean, a lot of times these areas, you start with 120 and by the 4th or 5th opening, there's 70 boats there. So, I mean, how do you plan on keeping an active calculation on the effort?
Yeah, I mean, I will admit a large part of this is based on people accurately reporting in SAFES. So we can see who lands by tagging area, how many participants in a given day. So we can see it when people use that tagging area. When they go to the dealer, we can see how many people participated in the fishery that day. But in terms of being out on the water, multiple days to count boats, I don't think we were planning on that at this point, unless we were to coordinate with enforcement to help us with that.
And you'd also keep track of the number of days that it's open.
Oh, for sure. Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Brennan, you have a question?
Yeah. So if say we start off like all of June and we have 100 boats out there, like you guys are saying, and then mid-July we only are working with like 50 to 70, like only 50 to 70 that can continue to go the days that are open. Do things change? Do we continue to work with that 100 people that would be working there? Because the numbers are going to change if there's not as many people out there. If there's not 100 every single time.
Yeah. So just from the how it will likely work is the fewer people fishing would be reflected in the landings. I mean, so at this point,
yeah.
it's safe.
Keep going. Sorry.
No, so in a dynamic schedule like 4 and 5, if you had a set schedule and said, we're gonna go this long until there's a trigger hit based on the total allowable catch, then if there was fewer people starting to fish, then theoretically and other things were relatively stable, then you would theoretically then have more days available of which we would track and confirm in SAFES.
So you would be able to confirm to us that we would be able to get more days because there would be less people fishing.
If the reg described it, so like in the example of Mike's in the option number 3, I don't think I would suggest then that would happen in that one. But
so if we put it in there, that's a possibility.
But the way Mike has it is there aren't other days, or the way that the rise of proposal reads, it stops the 3rd, regardless.
Yes, but if we put that in as a clause, you're saying that could be done.
Yeah. If that was the case, but you have to pick more days, and I guess at what point where do you stop? So in the context of like finfish, which I'm sure most of you know, we effectively have a set schedule whether it's daily possession limits or aggregate, or in some fisheries days, of which we monitor the quota over a season. And if it hits early, then it hits early, and we kind of dynamically monitor the harvest. So like another option would be, instead of changing the days, you could change the limits or something of that nature to allow
Okay.
for
Yeah.
complete
Okay.
harvest.
Something along those lines.
Yeah.
Okay, so we just have to put that in the clause.
Yeah, we would need guidance from you all tonight, I think. And I think maybe what I would even suggest is ultimately tonight we form a list, and maybe it starts with Mike's or with the Rise Up proposal, if that's what people want, and start to craft what we think, at least bullets, things that you would recommend to the council for including in a final regulation.
Okay.
And kind of work from that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask Mike a question?
I'm here.
Hey, Mike, did you have it intentionally in that way, that thinking that the days may not run out, and you didn't want to go any further than Labor Day? Or if we had the opportunity, you'd be okay with going after Labor Day?
Well, the dealers I talked to had concern about after Labor Day. And the thought was that we could reevaluate the area for maybe winter opening, or, you know, how we want to move forward on it. Do we want to move to a 1 day a week? Which one of the suggestions was go to a 1 day a week if we haven't hit the 27 days. So basically it was just kind of, because a lot of guys, they're talking about having that area open for the winter, you know, like Greenwich, you know. So it was the idea that we'll do a pause, kind of evaluate where we're at, what the production was, you know, a better understanding of maybe more hours are needed, or, you know, whatever, as we talked about, you know, to tweak it to make it better. So the idea was just to kind of pause it after Labor Day and just kind of reconvene and see what we want to do going forward with the area.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. That'd be great. Open it up like this, you know, like the Greenwich schedule. Well, once a week, but I mean, as far as during Greenwich, like around Christmas, when we can get rid of the stuff again. But I didn't want you want to use the whole allotment up, basically. We don't want to leave any on the table, right?
Well, that was why we went with a more aggressive schedule. Is basically, you know, I had a different thought at first, but, you know, with a half-inch closure, and Jerry, everybody knows that it just, you know, it could be sunny at my house and raining up in Providence, and then you're all set to go to work the next day and it says, no, it's closed. So just the really difficult way to try to, you know, schedule something like that. It was to be aggressive, have the days written down. One particular day, like I said, it's the 5th of July is a Monday. So I didn't think that was appropriate to be there. The dealers, you know, it's a holiday. So just, I think we should probably add the 27 days if that makes DM, you know, more comfortable and on the proposal. But basically just lay it out there so people know, you know, what we're looking for and what we're trying to achieve.
So I agree. I'm just curious if when those 27 days, that schedule runs out, who's going to make the decision as to how many days after? Are we having another meeting, or is it just is it over? You know, Connor's view, you know, is it over after that, or, you know,
Well,
I mean, I don't want to put a, you know, some kind of like a sunset thing on it and then find out we didn't reach the limit because of rain, and there's still a lot of you know, there's still a lot of quota.
well, that would be part of the discussion. I mean, if we get to, you know, Labor Day and there's 5 more dates left, we might want to try to, you know, do some quick maneuvering and get, you know, Christmas in, you know, 5 dates there, or something along that. You know, I mean, is Connor and Anna looking at these 27 days are for the calendar year, you know, from January to December? Is it, you know, a start date year? So from June 1st to next June 1st, that's 27 openings. So that's gonna be part of it too, how they, you know, how they look at the number of openings. Is it per year or per calendar, or what?
Yeah, I guess I would say that I would think about it for a calendar year. So I would look to, if you wanted to, if there were days left over, one option would be kind of like, again, having a more not as a more specified schedule in 3, but just have a set schedule and just say it's gonna close when the triggers hit, regardless of Labor Day. In either direction, longer thereafter or shorter. I guess I'd have to think more about how any leftover quota could be implemented for a December harvest schedule. Effectively is what you're suggesting, Mike.
Or do we carry over the extra days till the next year?
Right, or yeah, right. And that is something that we would traditionally do. If you had leftover quota, it would just roll to the next.
And I really think that the 3 hours is going to be helpful in reducing the production. So the 27 days might be, underestimating the days we can get there to hit the threshold.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense from what you're describing, using the 3 hours, and see what others think too, if you're in agreement with that. I have a few hands raised and a question or comment in the chat. I'll go to Brennan. He had his hand up first.
So quick question, say we hit the 27 days, but we haven't hit the 2 million. Is that it? Is it still closed? Like, is it whatever comes first? Just curious.
And I guess that's what kind of Gary and Mike were speaking to, right? So it's as to how to get there. So in the way that Mike's is written now, and this is the decision. So as the way it's written now, if we went through 27 days, as well as the additional days that are there, and then we still didn't hit 2 million cohogs as written, it would close. But if
we just have to put in another clause. Would that is what you're saying?
Yeah, or depending on what you want to do, it sounds like there's a decision as to whether whatever's unused, do you want it next year or not, or do you want to try and?
I mean, if I'm speaking for Mars Seafood, and I would prefer before Christmas and before New Year's, if that's a possibility. After Labor Day, the market starts to slow down a little bit, and that's when guys are going to get mad when the price drops. So kind of after Labor Day it's possible, like most people will be able to handle it, but I mean, everyone would prefer December, right before Christmas, right before New Year's, when the price will be up again.
That was our thought.
Sorry.
Yeah, I agree. That was kind of our thought.
Yeah.
So then if we wanted December days, I mean, it's not currently set up that way, but perhaps we'd have to think of timelines as to what the quota looks like through the summer, and then devise days and bring it. Like we review the winter harvest schedule every fall or late summer, so that we would probably discuss it at that time with Greenwich and the other areas.
Yeah, we have to.
So if we don't.
December.
Okay.
All right, John has a question.
All right, hi. Yeah, I just think if the quote, what your 2 million piece quota that you have just needs to be played out as the summer goes on, whatever we have for openings with the rain closure, you get through, until September 1st or, Labor Day. And you're gonna have to let it go one day a week or whatever, just to go through it. The market can handle that, because whatever time you're gonna put in for that one day, you're basically catching twice as much as if you work that day anyway. And then you're gonna lose these. By then, it's probably gonna be played out enough where you're not gonna get part timers and all that other stuff coming out, But I just can't see leaving the quota on the table in any way, because I would venture to guess that nobody really even agrees with the quota to begin with, because I don't, we work areas every day all year, and there's no quota on how many you can take, but this place has been closed for 50 years or whatever, and you want to save it, just keep saving it. You know, it's going to be good to turn it over and use it, and next year it'll be better. You know, or it'll thin things out and things will have an opportunity to grow. So that's just my opinion on it. But there are, you know, 5 other proposals to look at on this whole thing. So, you know, I think we should just look at some of those.
Thank you, John. Mike, I saw you were raising your hand.
Yeah, just I was concerned, and the gentleman from Mars mentioned it, and my shop mentioned it, that if you get past Labor Day, you really risk of having, you know, the price go down, and then the diggers have to work the other 4 or 5 days with a lower price. At least the summertime, everything's strong, everything's moving, you know, but sometimes everybody knows it comes to a screeching halt after Labor Day. So that was our concern. If there's any days left on the table, we'd certainly look into try to get them back before the end of the calendar year, if that's what people want to do. And that's where we would target maybe the December. We'd have till November to make the decision through the SAP and the Marine Fishery Council to get the regs in, as Connor said, just like we do with Greenwich. So I think there's an opportunity that we could restart the program within a couple of months if that's what people want to do, to a 1 day. But there was just a lot of concern that 1 day would be enough to knock the price down, and then all the full timers would have to deal with it, you know, for the rest of the week.
I'll just comment on that. I totally understand what you're saying. I don't think September is all that bad for a market for shellfish, but if you can extend it, if it's not a big deal to get it into December, but then you still have to worry about the rain closure. So you just don't want to see the days go to waste. That's my main objective, because I've dealt with all these quotas on finfish, you know, and it's so little to begin with that, you know, you got to use it up, and, you know, you just don't want to see anything go to waste. That's kind of my point on the whole thing.
You know, well, Connor said that we can put them over to the next year. So if we do have days left on the table, that they could be added to the 2022 scheduling.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, fine, if that's what they're gonna do. You just don't want to get shorted on anything, you know. Seeing with the finfish, you know, it stayed so low for so long, they finally raised it, you know, but it's just, like I said, I just don't want to see anything get wasted, not be used, you know. So I'll just leave it at that. But I'm gonna have to exit this meeting in a couple of minutes because I have another Zoom meeting to go on. So if I don't know when you're gonna plan on voting, if I could just get a quick answer on that.
Yeah, we'll try to get moving to that quickly here. I just have, let me see. Jeff had a comment. Let's see. He wants me to read out. So he said 2 million clams at, say, 350 per bushel is 5,714 bushels divided by 38 days is 150 bushels per day, or only 25 harvesters. 5,714 bushels divided by 27 is 211 bushels a day, or 35 harvesters at 6 bushels. Am I missing something? And Nick said, fair point, Jeff, depends on the mix. Yes, Mike.
Yeah, I mentioned this to you and Connor. It took me a while, sometimes a little slow on the uptick, but it seems like the bushel limit is more for the fishermen and the enforcement. You guys are going by the safest and the count system. So whether there's 200 in a bushel or 500 in a bushel or whatever the number is, it really doesn't matter. What the bushel limit is enforcement and the digger's way of, you know, gauging their harvest for the day. And you guys are going to be looking at safest for the numbers.
Yep, that's exactly right. Thanks for answering that. All right, Katie, do you want to lead some kind of, we can come up with some kind of suggestions to bring to the council before John has to hop off.
Yeah, so would any of the panel members like to make a motion? And then we can start a discussion and tweak it from there.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to support number 3 with the added addendum of a 27-day evaluation by Fish and Wildlife on opening further days.
Do we have a second?
I would second it, but not at 7 o'clock.
Okay. Would you like to make a new motion, or would you like to change your motion, Mike, before we second or go to discussion?
If there's nobody else to give me a second other than Jerry for the 8 o'clock, I would appreciate that. If not, I'd like to get this schedule moved forward.
Okay. So are you changing your motion to 8 o'clock?
If there's no other second other than Jerry, then I will, but I'm hopefully waiting for somebody to have a second other than Jerry.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we'll wait for Anna to get it up on the screen, and if anyone wants to start a discussion or have any other comments about this, feel free.
Well, since I'm hearing crickets and I think it's out my window, I'll go from 8 to 11.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. And I just want to clarify. So using the motion as written with the change in the start time, is there a way, would you like to add if there are any, if there's extra days to be added that you'd like them to be addressed at the winter harvest schedule SAP, or somehow add that, because from what I gather from the discussion, you'd like to use the safest data to dictate the dates and the longevity of this opening, correct?
Well, you're directing to me. I'm not crazy about the way Fish and Wildlife is doing it, but that's the way they're doing it. And we're trying to set a schedule with that. If it makes everybody feel better that, for reevaluation by the SAP in late September, so we could have a SAP meeting in late September to kind of evaluate.
Okay. So the closure would, it would close on September 3rd. And if there are any dates remaining for the year, or any, open days left for the year, then SAP will decide whether or not to use them in December or roll over till 2022. Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds
I just
good.
want to make sure when at the council, I have everything clear for what you guys are trying to.
If you want to add the language closed to be evaluated by the Shellfish Advisory Panel for future scheduling in September, if you want to have a date, but if you want to add SAP there to kind of clarify the evaluation process, that'd be good.
Yeah, I think just having it in the motion to say, so that way it will be brought up at the winter harvest SAP, whenever that is, August, September.
That's good. Thank you.
Do any other panel members have anything else to add to the discussion or any comments? Okay.
Katie, this is Connor. Would you mind if I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Mike, I just want 2 things to clarify, if you don't mind. So ultimately, the the proposal would be for the first 27 days of your list to be open, and any days closed in that would launch subsequently the other days to be open, right?
Correct.
Okay, great. So we'll make that edit. Well, we'll make sure it reads as such then. And then just to also confirm that they'll be in there if, for example, for whatever reason, that over the first 2 weeks everything's harvested, the trigger would also initiate a closure or of it, like we would in Finfish, correct?
Well, I'm a little confused about that. When I had an email exchange with you guys, I thought you said if we had a schedule for 27 days, you're going to follow through on those days, regardless of the threshold of 2 million. Is this an additional, jump?
Well, I guess then I think there's like a little bit of because we're trying to manage it in the way that we are in terms of ensuring we don't over harvest. I think our goal is to try and be more dynamic with this area, also based on the feedback from other panelists, other industry members last time, as well as enforcement. So I think ultimately that would be preferable, is to have this schedule set up. And if everything gets harvested in 2 weeks as opposed to late August, then we would not want to over harvest. So that would be the ability for us to do so. So that would be the division's suggestion. I'm not sure how likely that is, but I think it's similarly how we would want to extend it if we don't use the full quota. Then we want to ensure that we don't over harvest by having that in there as well. And I think that's what Jerry was. I think maybe not, he didn't explicitly say that, but I think that was my question earlier, and he had described adding that in as well. But perhaps I'm incorrect on that.
Well, this problem would exist no matter what schedule we chose, right? I mean, are you saying you want to put in a 2 million cap on harvesting and make it a hard cap, so when we hit that, it closes regardless of how many more days that we have scheduled?
Right. I mean, it doesn't have to be 2 million, but we would be the trigger, basically. Yeah, it would be 2 million. So we would write, like we do for finfishes, that when the quota is met, the fishery will, the area would close.
Connor, that's kind of like your ball of wax. I didn't want to, like I said, that issue would be for every plan that's up there, all 6 of them. If you feel that Fish and Wildlife needs to have that caveat in there that these days will be open, and up until a certain threshold is met, or at that threshold, Fish and Wildlife will evaluate, where they're at. I mean, I always thought that was kind of your part of the process.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be in your proposal, and we will obviously provide comments to the council as well. We had discussed it in the previous slide, so I just thought I would ask about it. But yeah, that sounds fine. I just wanted to clarify.
Okay.
Okay, how does the motion look? Let me know if there's things you want me to change.
Looks good to me.
Yeah, I like the idea of discussing that at the winter harvest SAT meeting, Katie. That was a good idea.
And you don't need to put anything, I know, like in the email you sent out, it was, it seemed like there were 2 options, to have like the hard number of dates, or go by the safest reporting data. You don't think that should be in the motion at all, do you? That, it's obvious reading it that you'll be using safest, but instead of, just 27 days Am I kind of conflating things here?
So it's just from the discussion that Connor and Mike had, it was decided to just work with the set number of days.
Okay, all right, sorry. I think that part, that was
It's
over
okay.
my head. Sorry, guys.
No, that's a good question, Katie. And so I think I was just trying to provide input from the division or insight from the division on it. And then, we might provide that as input for the council as well to provide that language of using SAFES explicitly to more dynamically monitor the quota. So that's basically to answer your question, that could come in at the council level as a recommendation, but Mike had suggested to not have it here.
Okay, do any other panel members have any concerns or questions about that? What was just discussed? No. Okay. If there is no further discussion, I would like to call a vote on the motion on the screen to recommend to the council that the Providence River open 3 hours a day, 8 to 11 at a 6 bushel limit during the following days, 38 days total, and to add a 27-day addendum to open further days. Additional days added to the harvest schedule will be discussed during the winter harvest Shellfish Advisory Panel meeting. Okay, from the top. Jeff Gardner. Okay, yay, yes. Mike McGivney,
Yes.
Jerry Shai,
Yes.
Roger Tellier,
Yes.
Ed Triano,
Yes.
John McDonald, if you're still on here. No, okay. Brennan Bika.
Yes.
So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yeses and 0 no's. So the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Sorry. Okay. So
Actually, Anna, I think next on the agenda is information on upcoming statewide shellfish restoration planning process.
yes,
Okay.
this is the start to Eric's presentation here.
Okay.
So, Eric, you can begin whenever you like.
Okay. Can you hear me okay, Anna?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name's Eric Schneider, and I'm going to handle the next 3 items on the agenda. So these materials, there's only been a minor modification to the presentation since it went out. And so, I'll try to move through here pretty efficiently. And when I get to the end, we can definitely discuss, happy to answer questions or discuss any of the aspects in more detail. But optimistic that folks had the chance to actually review the slides, so we can keep going with the meeting. So I'm just going to have Anna progress the slides for me too. So if you wouldn't mind, Anna, could you go to the next one? And great, thanks. So the next couple of slides are going to provide a kind of this high level overview of some of the work that the Division of Marine Fisheries is going to begin to implement over the next couple of years. And so, I'll just give this overall caveat that, we're still working to finalize some of the funding and some of the specific approaches, but I definitely wanted to let, SAP members know that this is coming down the pipe, and it does have bearing on the work we're doing in Quanaketag and the SAP's discussion on the Quani oyster harvest moratorium later. So go ahead, Anna, next slide, please. Thanks. So overall, the state, and I'll get into the details in a minute, but the state is initiating the process to develop a statewide shellfish restoration plan. We envision this being a living plan, meaning that once we get to the end of the planning process, this isn't a bookshelf static plan, that as more information becomes available that's pertinent, if there's interest to expand it into other species as we go down the road, then all of that is on the table, is an option. To start, because the bulk of our work focuses on oysters, the eastern oyster is going to be the focal species. And I'll get into the two elements, but know that one of the elements is a large social stakeholder aspect where we're engaging stakeholders, getting feedback. And during that part, we're going to seek feedback on all species. So, and really so that in that part, we can get a better understanding of collectively of what industry and stakeholders are looking for across all of the shellfish species. But as we move forwards, a lot of the ecological work and the planning work will focus on oysters. But as we go through that, if there's a lot of interest and we have funding, like I said, we can expand this to future species like, quahog steamers or scallops. Next slide, please. So overall, this need has been, well documented. There's been a lot of work that shows, restoration and enhancement projects that include this robust planning and design process up front, that includes stakeholders, that includes social aspects as well as biological aspects, really give you a better plan and maximize the benefits of that work. So maximize not only the biological, but the social benefits of restoration. The need for this plan has been known and documented by, I'll just run through these, the Shellfish Initiative, the Shellfish Restoration Working Group. The division has seen it for a long time, as well as the Shellfish Management Plan. Next, please. So the overall goal is to develop and use a framework to design and implement a statewide restoration plan. And during that planning process, we want to consider and collect both social aspects, so that stakeholders' values, knowledge, and also ecological information, so that as we move forward, we can combine these to really make good, sound decisions. And we also want to minimize, of course, user conflicts as we go through. And so one of, I'll give a really oversimplified kind of view of this, is that, like I said, this is a pretty large endeavor. It's going to be a collaborative endeavor. We're going to the greatest degree possible, leverage, expertise and resources of many of our partners. And using this overall social ecological systems approach, which there's a real basic flow chart in the bottom, is really what a lot of states are doing to try to address this. And so to really simplify it, if you follow the flow chart, right now we're in the process development stage. I'll go through some of the information collection in a little more detail in a moment, but we're designing the framework in the process. Then we're going to move through into the information collection. This is going to have two components, a social component and an ecological component. We're going to take all of the information we gather through those and combine them. And we're going to use that to try to really identify restoration goals and targets in a spatially specific manner, identify using all of the information that's available. So that's the the data that people are contributing directly. That's data that Ben spoke of earlier. That's going to be available, whether it was derived through the base SAM, through previous SAMs, through the division's work, but all of the information we have on uses in the bay, and whether that's fishing, shell fishing, navigation, moorings, habitat, really all of the information we have will be combined, and so that discussed in a transparent and open manner, so that we can establish goals and targets and make informed decisions on how we want to proceed with restoration in the future. And so we will finalize this plan, but there'll be an opportunity, certainly as more research, science, and information comes to light, that we can go back and modify it and incorporate that, consider it, so that we continue to improve the overall restoration practices that we undertake. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, there's two components. Just very briefly, the social component is an aspect that we're still trying to secure funding for. We're pretty close, we're not quite there yet. But the basic idea is to use a number of different approaches. We're still finalizing those, but those could be, you know, maybe they're in-person meetings, maybe they're webinars, some degree of workshops or surveys, a number of different approaches that we can use to collect really social information, and specifically, you know, try to get at, you know, what are some of the services that people want? What are the areas where they'd really like to see those services enhanced? What are the overall goals? Where are areas that you don't want either any work done, or you want work focused on other aspects of the fishery? And so going through collecting all of that information so that it can be combined with the kind of ecological or biological information that we collect in that other node. And so we do have the funding to do this. We are currently moving forwards with this work starting this summer. So DMF sought and was awarded a Southern New England program grant from Restore America's Estuaries. And so for the next few slides, I'll just walk through this quickly because this is funded, so I can tell you specifically what we're doing. Next, Anna, please. And so you guys know this, and you probably saw this in the presentation. So, you know, overall oyster populations are at historic lows. And so that's why we're developing this plan. And really one of these components, a key component, is generating, you know, really a full understanding and assessment of not only the status of the past restoration work, but the baseline of where our wild or natural oyster populations are throughout the state. Next, please. So this work is going to leverage all of the data that we have that's been collected to date, and we're going to go and collect new data. And that map on the right, you know, largely has these dashed red circles and these solid blue lines. The dashed red circles denote areas where we've done restoration work, and those reefs have recently fallen out of our monitoring cycle. In the most part, it's within the last year that some of these, you know, we had in some cases a pretty decent time series and they just fell out of that cycle. So we want to go back, you know, capture that data, make sure we know the status of those systems, and then throughout those blue areas, working collaboratively with Northeastern University and the Nature Conservancy, go and survey all of the wild populations that we can find and that we either know about or folks inform us about within those. And so understanding really the spatial extent, the habitat properties, the environmental conditions in areas not only where we have restored reefs, but also where we have these natural populations is going to be really useful to try to inform how we move forwards with restoration. Next, please. And so some of the things, go back just one slide, please, Anna, if you can. So some of the things we can use this information for, and we do currently, is we use this information to guide and continually improve the restoration work that we do, you know, tweaking practices, whether it's exactly how we build those reefs. So height, content, lineages, all of those things, in addition to using this information more collectively to develop a habitat suitability model for all of the Rhode Island state waters. And so that will be largely system by system for the coastal ponds and then for the Bay and Sakonnet River. And what that will let us do is use the data that we collected through the social aspects of what do folks want to get out of restoration? What are the kind of the ecosystem services they want to see? What was the feedback we got on locations? And we can meld that with the Habitat Suitability Index and the information we have on where oyster populations, what's the status of them, what's proving, you know, successful, and where's areas that we might be more challenged. And we can combine that all together to develop the spatially explicit restoration goals and plans, you know, for all of these areas in the state. And this is a slide showing a number of our current partners and funding sources. And so the next portion of the talk is going to talk about the status of oysters in Quaney. And so before I go on to that, does anyone have any questions on kind of this update of the restoration planning process? And I don't see any. So if you you and I'm missing you, by all means, just unmute and shout out. Otherwise, I'm just going to progress forwards. Okay. Next is a summary. Could you go to the next slide? Thanks. So next is a summary of the status of kind of our restoration work in Pawnee Pond. Next slide, please. And so I'll give you some background about what has, in terms of oyster management and restoration, at least in the recent past in Quaney. So some of this predates me, so it's useful for me just to recap it for everyone. So very briefly, and this is the one slide that I think changed since it went out. We kind of expanded the background on this. In 2007 and 2008, the division conducted surveys throughout Quaney Pond and found that there were really no wild oysters left in the pond, that they were severely depressed, and they recommended a pond-wide closure and that restoration be initiated. So in September 2010, there was a 3-year oyster harvest moratorium that was implemented, and restoration work started and was conducted. I think that should be 2010 and 2011, where they did kind of it was the start of the restoration, the oyster restoration work through this first equip phase, where they would put down culch and then they'd put seed on shell oysters on top of that. That was done back in September of 2013. It was determined that the resource had not recovered, or there was not a self-sustaining population in the pond, so the moratorium was extended. And at that point, it was extended at least for 3 years. And so in 2015, the division obtained funding and went out and did survey work, really of all of the restoration work that was done during that initial equip oyster survey work in 2009 to 2011. And of course, that included work in Quanticottag Pond, and we'll show a little bit of that in just a moment. And again, it was determined that really outside the restoration reefs at that point were not doing well, and that overall the pond had not covered, and so the division recommended that the moratorium be extended, and at that point it was extended for 5 years. And so starting the following year, the division embarked with partners on a number of restoration and enhancement work, and so that those created reefs, and we're still doing that work. I'll show a little bit of that in just a minute. But steadily since 2017, we have increased the number of oysters in Quaney Pond. And overall, these oysters, like I said, we're using the monitoring data and continually improving our restoration practices, and that's translating into increased survival, and we think will translate into recruitment in some of these systems. And so one thing I wanted just to highlight here is that you notice as you go through, it was 3 years, and then it was extended for 3 years and extended for 3 years. And this is, to my knowledge, the only time that the division has come in with a recommendation to the SAP that actually includes a sunset clause. I think, several folks on this call know that the division doesn't support putting in the sunset clauses, in part because we feel that they're viewed as a rebuilding timeline, and they're not. We've made it clear that, we do not expect that this resource is going to be, in this case, like rebuilt by a given date, that we're doing work. In some cases, we're seeing recruitment or we're seeing increased survival, but it's not at a level that is self-sustaining. And so if the goal of this work is to increase oyster population specifically in Quaney Pond so that they're sustainable and you can have sustainable harvest, we're not achieving that goal. And so I just want to be clear that when folks say, you keep shifting the goal line, that these sunset dates weren't established as goal lines. They were established to ensure that the division comes back to certainly the SAP and the council and provides an update and gets recommendations, and that this doesn't sit on the shelf and it stays closed indefinitely, because that's not our intention. But I just want to lay that out there. Next slide, please. So this slide, now we're going to get into some of the actual results from the monitoring. And I'll try to keep this, again, pretty straightforward so we can move quickly through it. The bar plot on the bottom is showing the average oyster density across the restoration reefs in Quaney Pond at these 2 year stops. And so the y-axis is showing again the density. And so you can see that in 2015, when we went back and monitored the work that had been done from 2010 to 2011 in Quaney, that those oyster densities were down around 26 oysters per meter squared. And so then starting in the work, increasing from 2016, like I said, we've made about 20 oyster reefs. So we've continually increased that biomass by continually making more reefs and seeding it. And we have plans to continue that through at least 2024. And that our most recent monitoring shows that these densities are 5 times higher than 2015. Now, some of that is because we are continually seeding it, but some of it's because we've improved our techniques and how we construct reefs, where we place them, and we're continually evaluating using different lineages and seed sources to try to improve that. Next slide, please. And so this slide, I think, is a pretty important slide. And so the plot on the bottom is showing the average oyster shell height for some of the reefs that we've monitored rather intensively twice a year over time. So then you look at the x-axis, you see the F, which is the fall monitoring, and the spring monitoring. And so in particular, these reefs were built in the spring of 2017. And so the first monitoring was done in the fall of 2017. So you can see over time, that height, just like you would expect, has continually increased. And once we got to the fall of 2019, it passed a critical threshold. And so that blue line, when you follow it across to the x-axis, equates to 76 millimeters or 3 inches, which is not just the minimum size, but it's also assumed to be really the maturation size. And so that's when we think oysters, on average, begin spawning. And with time, once you get beyond that size, the sex ratios begin to equilibrate. You get more females in the population, and as these animals grow larger and the sex ratio is more balanced, your reproductive potential increases. And so that's why you can see, yes, it kept creeping up in 2020. And so really the spring of 2020 marks the first year, not only for these reefs, but for the reefs that were created during this current or modern restoration approach, when we think those would actually have become mature and started to contribute, spawn and potentially contribute, larvae that could recruit in this system. Next slide, please. And so some of this I might have just covered, but again, because they're spawning primarily in May, August last year was the first year, but about half of the reefs now that we've built since 2017 have reached this threshold. So we're getting to a critical, really, point where we're starting to get a lot of our biomass that's reproductively viable, and we're optimistic. This is going to continue for at least the next 3 years, but hopefully probably the next 5 to 6 years, even under just the current trajectory of the work that we had planned. That will continue to have more oysters become mature and hopefully spawning, and hopefully that will translate into recruitment, not just on these reefs, but in other areas that have been pretty limited to date. Next slide, please. And so really it's in all of these systems, once our biomass gets critically low, that we wind up in this cycle of poor recruitment and really the absence of these multiple year classes. And this really hinders the population pond-wide from increasing and becoming sustainable. And so if you think of this kind of in your more classic, fishery management stock assessment approach, right now in Quaney, the stock is still, despite our restoration work, the stock is still depressed. And even though we don't have an assessment, I think it's fair to say that, it's overfished, that this stock is not at a level that's self-sustaining. And so there's been no harvest. And right now we're actually moving into a period when there's going to be a lot of that's relatively speaking, a lot of potential spawning that can occur. So there's a great opportunity to have recruitment throughout the system. And so really our recommendation is what we think the best approach is to allow this to proceed, to allow a few more years of spawning by these oysters that are just reaching maturity. And so through our SNP work, that is kind of that ecological field survey work, where we're going to be out there doing the pond-wide survey documenting if there's been recruitment throughout the system, if so, where, using the habitat suitability model to determine are there areas that didn't receive recruitment yet, but we think should be viable. We can go back and assess those later in the cycle. So use that actual like on the ground information that we hopefully will be improving recruitment over the next few years, combined with the information that we get out of the shellfish restoration plan. So what do folks want to see done in all of these systems? But I think when you look across these systems, you're able to think about it collectively and how does that influence the plan in Quaney. And I won't get into like the various iterations that could come out of that. You know, that's really for the plan to determine. But I think there's a really great opportunity here to kind of maximize this window of opportunity and collect information so that when we get to the kind of the end of this cycle, that we have a lot of information and we can make an informed decision that's in large part scoped by stakeholders, and hopefully it matches what the goals and needs are for that system. Next slide, please. And so I'll just reiterate like the couple of points here. So right now, the harvest and possession limit in Quaney Pond of oysters is prohibited until 2015-21. That's the sunset we set last time. The division recommendation is to continue the harvest moratorium until November 15th of 2025. And so that date was selected for a couple of reasons, but one, it aligns with the Bissell Fox Island date. So rather than continually coming back, we wanted these to align so that when we get through the, collect, like I said, collect this data, get through the shellfish restoration plan, that we can address all three of these areas, at the same time. And so with that, I'd be happy to, take any questions. And then that concludes at least the slides I have. I actually, Anna, do I have a map of Quaney in the next slide? And so I apologize for this map, just because of computer stuff. I couldn't use ARC to make the map I wanted for today. So I leveraged our map server. And again, just because of some computer issues, I couldn't generate a legend. So I'm just going to walk you through what this shows, but maybe just looking at Quaney, I thought might be helpful for this. And I can't mouse over it, but when you look around the breachway entrance, you see like a light orange color. Those are areas that through the shellfish management plan were identified as recreationally important shellfishing areas, not species specific, just shellfishing areas. Your hues of green are eelgrass areas. The dark kind of bold orange areas, usually in squares, are approved aquaculture leases. And thanks for helping me out here, Anna, in pointing to these. The kind of middle of the ground orange, kind of like I'll let Anna point to it so I don't, thanks. These, and there's one in the West Passage too, that are the kind of more permanent closed areas or spawner sanctuaries. The one in the west was largely, I think, established for quahogs, and the one in the east was established to the oyster suitability. And then there are some additional areas that we've set up oyster reserves in the pond that also support oyster restoration. But one thing we've tried to do over this process is establish a number of different sites in the eastern end of the pond and some in the western end of the pond that have oyster restoration reefs in them, so that essentially we don't fully understand, don't pretend to understand the hydrodynamics of this system. And so we're trying to maximize the opportunity to put spawning oysters in locations so that they can hopefully travel and settle out in suitable habitats. So we've done that by placing them in areas that are at least suitable so they can survive in different areas of the pond. And so, sorry, with that kind of visual frame of reference, I'd be happy to yield and take any questions. And Anna, if you see someone raise their hand and I miss it, by all means, feel free to call them in.
Yeah, I don't see anyone raising their hand yet. Nothing in the chat.
Okay. And with that, if someone has a question, just you could unmute and call.
Yeah, are there any the aquaculture leases in this area?
Yeah, so Mike, and Anna will point to them, but these like bright orange
That's what they are? Okay.
boxes, those are all the approved leases in the ponds.
Now, do you think they're having an effect on throwing seed out along with what you're doing?
I think if so, it's minimal. So most of the folks don't hold seed to that size. And so last year in particular, because of COVID, and again, this year, there's been a program where in partnership with NRCS through the EQIP program that I guess I could say we've been able to, make the best of that opportunity where if folks had stuff that went to size and couldn't go to market, that we could incorporate it into a restoration practice. Quani was a pond in which folks didn't have stuff to contribute. In the future, this year, I think they might, but overall, most folks don't have a lot of stock on the bottom of their lease that's growing large and contributing. And I'm not implying that folks don't have any. I know a lot of folks that have had some over time, and I can't say there's none in this pond, but I'm not aware of any. And that doesn't mean that stuff couldn't fall off their boat or escape outside their lease footprint, but I think overall it's probably minimal, and it's not enough for us to lean on that trying to provide like a significant contribution to the pond's recovery.
And if I may, one more, if we split the baby and gave you 2 extra years on the extension, would you be able to, do enough survey to say, hey, we're seeing seeds starting to set up, we think the program's working? Because it's always been our concern that, 4 years is a long time, and, it's either working or not working. So in the past, we've kind of gone a little less than what DEM has recommended as far as time, with the idea that we could always reevaluate it like we're doing right now to extend it. So do you think you'll be in a position in a couple of years to have the survey capabilities to know if it's working?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Mike, and I definitely appreciate the thought process there. So this summer is slated at some point. We don't have the schedule nailed down, but I guess I can say in 2021 we will do a pond-wide survey of Quani. It's one of our top priorities. And our only thought was if we just cross that blue line, thinking back to the slides a few lines back, if let's go down a couple scenarios here, that if spawning conditions and recruitment conditions are good this year, then we could see a big bump in recruitment throughout these. But if it's somewhat of a atypical year, let's hope in the long run that would be the type of scenario when we don't see a lot of recruitment. But there is the potential that if conditions aren't advantageous, then we interpret that a lack of recruitment is due to failure and not just kind of these interannual oscillations that you see. And so that was one reason why we went with a slightly longer time frame, because we thought that we could get in there in 2021 and then follow up in 2023. That would kind of maximize it, and we'd get to be able to say, okay, so whatever's set up in the kind of last 2 years, what do they look like 3 and 4 years out? Was that a one-off where it recruited, but then it immediately died, or there's a lot of predation pressure? And so, yeah, we saw recruitment in 2021 and it didn't hold, or we might say, oh gosh, look at those areas that we initially saw recruitment. We've continually had recruitment there. We're starting to get multiple cohorts and survival that's equivalent or better than what we see in some of the areas of the ponds. And so I just offer those as like 2 different scenarios, and maybe that's I think one reason why we looked at the longer time frame. And I guess here, I'm eyeing the long game, as I think we have put a lot of work into it. I think we're getting to a critical point, and of all our systems, I think Quani has a lot of potential for a number of reasons, and it'd be, I think it'd be wise to try to see how it plays out. But specifically to your point, can we collect information over the next 2 years and come back and update the SAP? We can definitely, do that. And I'll offer an alternative, is that maybe it would not be in regulation, but even if we went with the 4-year, not we, but if the 4-year moratorium extension was enacted, nothing precludes us from coming back in 2 years and giving you an update. So that what that would do is let us go out and do the survey work, next year, continue and do survey work in the other areas of the state. And although it wouldn't be finalized, we can definitely come back and give you guys an update as to how Quaney would stack up. But I'm not sure that we can run, because of, you saw how large our kind of spatial footprint is to survey. I'm not sure that we can do Quaney in back-to-back years without jeopardizing survey work somewhere else.
Eric, I have a comment from Jeff Gardner to read out. He says, let's be honest, there are no true native oysters. Rhode Island has had Chesapeake Bay oysters dumped in Rhode Island for over 100 years. The oysters found in back coves, etc., are simply survivors, i.e. a mix of broodstock. The spawner area to the west has been closed for at least 40 years. I know lots of people that wish they could clam there. I do not want a 2025 sunset. We went through this concern last year. And then he asked, what percent does DEM occupy a? I'm a little confused by that. Did you hear that, Eric?
I did. And so certainly the western closed area, so that's the kind of spawner sanctuary in the western part that does predate me. That is not, that's not a highly suitable area for oysters. There is like firm substrate on the bottom, but that was created for cohogs. And at least previous survey work has shown that, there used to be a mix of steamers, enclosed cohogs, razors. There's still, a lot of cohogs there. But to my knowledge, except for maybe a couple literal like handfuls of oysters that were in the far eastern area and might not have even been in the sanctuary. And that's like an anecdotal tale. I'm not aware of any oyster work that closure has supported. Regarding Jeff's comment on, are there like native Rhode Island wild oysters? I think that's a pretty accurate statement that all of the aquaculture that occurred, late 1800s, early 1900s, moved a lot of oysters, not just, most of them were from the Chesapeake, but also from New York and elsewhere. But so the remnant wild oysters that we refer to, that we're calling like natural oysters, are they quote unquote Rhode Island oysters from a historic genetic standpoint? No, unlikely. Could there be some out there that have not been discovered? It's possible, but they're likely hybrids. But what those stocks do show is that they have been able to be resilient, and in some of these small pockets, they are self-sustaining. So it's likely that they have traits that are advantageous and allowed them to persist in those systems. Now, whether those traits are highly adapted for the specific system that they're in, or whether those traits are also suitable for other areas is part of the work that we're specifically exploring. And so we use a mix. We have a number of research projects. Some of them, explicitly explore different lineages, and through the EQIP work, there's a number of restoration where we, in a really experimental manner, have employed different lineages. And so those include natural or wild lineages, as well as hatchery lineages. And overall, that, that kind of represents this, you could think of it like a portfolio effect, with in the absence of knowing the specific lineage that works best in the system and having a full understanding of the genetic makeup, that having a mix is one approach you can do that to kind of maximize the likelihood that you will have animals that are well adapted for specific environmental conditions in a given year. So a really hot year, really cold winter. And so those are some of the things we're doing. But we have seen, in particular in Quaney, that some of the natural lineages do overall show better survival. And we know from their persistence in other systems that they can spawn and have some of their offspring at least recruit and survive in those systems.
All right, Jeff said, good answer, Eric, thank you. I see Nicholas has his hand up. Go ahead.
Thanks, Anna. For some reason, I can't see the ones in the chat, so.
Oh, they were directed privately to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, Eric.
Hey, Nick.
So I'm just wondering what level of recruitment and densities on the reefs are you looking for before you feel comfortable considering the pond sustainable for harvest?
Yeah,
Is there like a benchmark?
Yeah, so
Go
and
ahead.
it's a great question. And so that specifically is something that I think through the shellfish restoration plan will be identified. And so for a specific area, you can say what is the goal of this area? You want to open for sustainable harvest. What are the densities that you want in the closed areas and the receiving areas? And so we, like as a group, haven't specifically identified that, but what we would like to see is that we'd like to see at minimum kind of multiple year classes recruiting out into the areas off of our restoration reefs. And we'd like to see them at densities that we would consider, sustainable. And so without fishing effort, ideally we'd like to see those, upwards of 100 or 150. I think the minimum threshold of that is kind of commonly used, that if you have aggregations of oysters that are less than 35 or 30 meters, that they're essentially like functionally not functionally extinct, but in terms of their spawning capacity, it's dramatically reduced and it might not be functional. And so when we go through and look at some of these areas, what we want to know is, where are they recruiting? Is it, are they surviving? Are we getting survival in those areas, and where are those areas? And so right now we have a certain configuration of where we've set up kind of our spawning brood stock reserves, and those are based on suitability. But depending on how everything shakes out in the pond and where things recruit, those those could change over time. I don't think that the division is wedded to a specific approach. I think what we see right now is that we're getting very little up to date. We have gotten very little recruitment, which is not surprising. There have been some patches that have shown recruitment and survival, but overall the recruitment has not kept up with what we will need to outpace mortality and keep these sustainable. But part of that is because we simply, for the bulk of the time, haven't had a really large enough biomass of animals kind of in that spawning potential. And so that's what we're getting to now. And so I guess I can't explicitly give you the threshold of saying, well, in this, if we saw 100, but I would say if we saw densities of 100 throughout the pond and we had multiple year classes, that would be fantastic. And that would be something that we would expect, especially if you're getting recruitment and you're getting multiple year classes on there, that would be something that would be a strong sign that this is in the right direction and likely something that can be sustainable going forwards.
All right, thank you very much.
Dennis, I had seen your hand raised. I don't know if you still have a question.
Hi, Anna. I guess it was going to be in response to Jeff's comments, if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Jeff, we've had this ongoing discussion about the sanctuaries. Based upon the fishing effort recreationally, particularly in all the salt ponds, if the sanctuary were to be fished and diminished, the harvest opportunities pond-wide would decline. I can almost guarantee that. Yeah, I know you assisted with the transplant into Winnipesaukee, but it's absolutely necessary to have protected brood stock to have a sustainable fishery, particularly for quahogs. In the case of the oysters, you know, I don't believe there to be a sustainable fishing opportunity yet, which Eric is obviously working toward. But again, that's whether or not they're Chesapeake origin, that doesn't justify opening it to wipe out the stocks in their entirety. I think there's a need to continue in this department legal responsibility to try to have a publicly sustainable harvest opportunities in the future. So those are my comments. If you want to talk about it later or another time, I'd be happy to.
All right, thanks, Dennis. Yeah, Mike.
I actually think that establishing these biomass centers is really what you need to do for the ponds to restore. They're similar to what we do with Greenwich. We have the closed areas and they act as the brood stock to repopulate the other areas. It either works or it doesn't. It depends on a lot of things on spawning. If I may, I'd make a motion that we extend it 2 years with the idea that they come back in the spring. I guess it'd be November 15th of 2023 and give us an update, because I really personally think that just having the biomass centers that you're doing your job. And I think restricting recreational harvest is important to establish more of a biomass, but I think the whole idea of this thing is to create an area that you can catch these. So if anybody has a second motion, and it's getting late in the day, I'd recommend a 2-year extension instead of the 4-year extension.
Do we have a second from the panel?
I'll second that.
Okay.
Roger.
A second by, okay, Roger Tellier, second.
Sorry, Mike, did you specify a date in the fall or?
Well, I thought I saw a November 15th number there.
Yep.
So I thought we want to address it prior to that. So it'd be 2023, I guess.
All right. Let me know if there's anything you'd like me to add.
Yeah, I don't know if you have to put, if there's a drop dead date, like I said, I remember seeing November 15th. So, prior to, whatever that 2-year extension would be.
Eric, was it the 25th?
Yeah, in the proposal, we had November 25th. I want to say 2025, so November 25th, 2023.
That's good.
Okay.
Let me make sure it was, sorry, 15th, not 25th.
15th.
Ah, somebody's paying attention.
It makes more sense.
Yeah, okay.
I thought maybe that was like Thanksgiving Day that year or something like that, but it's the 15th. So.
And just kind of a follow-up, when we put our spawner sanctuary in place, we didn't close the areas around it. We just left that and hoped that that area would produce and we'd see the benefits down the road, but we didn't close any areas. So that's kind of where my thinking is on that.
And Mike, I think if you don't mind, I don't want to curtail discussion on the motion, but I think long term, that is the goal. I think it's a matter of exactly what is the potential, how does the system respond, and where do those spawner sanctuaries belong versus harvest areas. And so we've put biomass in certain areas. And so it's possible that we get recruitment in some areas, and that when we look at this collectively, we find out that, yeah, there may be some of the areas that, and I'm not suggesting this is the case, but we might have to move things around and reconfigure, and we're not opposed to taking a hard look at what's best for the system. But I do, to be honest, I do envision that, like with these other systems, that there will be some type of closure at minimum to protect biomass, but our goal is not to keep the entire system, closed to harvest.
We have 2 years to figure it out.
All right.
Right, no clams.
Yeah, I don't know if it's worth in the, Dennis has a comment in the chat that the moratorium is oyster specific, Anna. I know that's what we're talking about, but maybe of the oyster closure, just for clarity in the record.
Yep. Yeah, you can go ahead. Sorry, do you want me to read the comment?
Okay.
Oh, I think I just read it, unless you have a different comment. But,
No, all the comments will get saved onto the record and will be included in the minutes too.
okay.
Okay, did anyone want to clarify oyster specific as per Dennis's comment into the motion, or are you happy with the way it is?
I think that's what it was all along.
Okay. Okay.
Unless I'm wrong.
With that, we will go to.
You want me to add oyster?
I think.
Yeah, I thought it was always oysters, but if you want to put that in there, it's fine.
Yep. All right, Katie.
Okay, so I would, if you guys are ready for a vote, from the top, Jeff Gardner. I don't know if anybody sees him, can record his, oh, yep, thumbs up, okay. Mike McGivney,
Yes.
Jerry Shy,
Yes.
Roger Tellier,
Yes.
Ed Triano,
Yes.
John McDonald. Not here.
Yes.
Oh, hey, John. Brennan Bika.
Yes.
Okay. We have 7 yeas, no nays, and no abstentions, so passed unanimously to maintain a 2-year extension of the oyster closure and revisit prior to November 15th, 2023.
Hopefully I'll be around by then.
I'll say the same thing. Thanks, everyone. If you have any other questions afterwards, feel free just to loop back with me. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay, we'll open up to any other matters. If anyone has anything they'd like to bring up. Oh, Brennan, did you just raise your hand?
Yes, I did. I just had a quick question. When would we know whether the Providence River would be open for Memorial Day? How soon would we know?
Well, so this will go to the council May 3rd, and then we will make a public announcement as soon as the opening date is determined and in regs. So, and that will be listserved through Marine Fisheries. I'll also send out an email to all the SAP members so that they're all in the loop on that too.
So you're thinking like, oh, go ahead.
If I may, if anybody really supports it getting open by then, maybe drop a line to the director or something and ask to facilitate or expedite the schedule.
I would definitely prefer it open for Memorial Day weekend. That would be great.
Yeah, no, we'll do everything we can to move it forward. You know, we're really in agreement and want this to move forward as quickly as possible. And, you know, it's.
I was also wondering if there was maybe something you guys could send to the dealers, or something that I can hang up on the door, or that lets the fishermen know, like, these are the days, like all the rules, like if we're gonna close, like something that I can show show the fishermen,
Yeah, I mean, I can send you a copy of the updated regs if that's helpful.
The list.
Yeah, whatever, more information for them.
Yep. And the listserv will include that information too, but yes, I'm happy to send that out as well.
Has anybody
Okay,
talked to
that's all.
enforcement about that?
Thank you.
About scheduling, Anna?
We have talked to them. I mean, they've received all the information that you have received, and they'll be presented your proposed schedule from this meeting, and we'll get feedback from them as well on your proposed schedule. And they should hopefully be participating in the Fisheries Council hearing too.
Okay. And just to point out, we didn't include any of the Monday holidays just for that reason.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And just as an FYI, we presented to you all about a year ago how we were updating the tagging area maps to coincide with the same labeling as the growing area maps. And we added a few additional tagging areas in the West Passage. So in the event of any harmful algal blooms, you don't have to close down the entire area. So that means Providence River will be tagging area 16. And so to keep that in mind, and we'll be putting information out about those updated tagging area maps as well. But that will be something we'll work with the dealers on to notify them and update them on those new labels. But the labeling isn't going to change in all the tagging areas, but where it differentiates from the growing area labels, they'll now be the exact same as the growing area labels to reduce confusion.
So Providence River is going to be, all they have to write is 16 as the area.
Yep.
Okay.
Because that's what the growing area is labeled as.
That's fine. I just want to know
Yep.
what I have to look out for.
Yeah, no, and we'll be sending all the information out to you, but I just wanted to give you a heads up on that.
Okay,
So it's gonna be a
thank you.
number system instead of like 1A, 1B, 1C.
There will be A, B, and C. So Greenwich Bay is going to change to, it'll all be 8, and it'll still be broken down into the same sections with A, B, C, D, E, F. So those will all stay the same, the letter part, but it'll now be 8 because the growing area is also 8. If that makes sense. No, it's usually I know it's gonna be, I know it's gonna be a learning
progress.
Yeah, it's just we want, it's been confusing how they're completely different than the growing area map. So this is one way where we're just trying to simplify it more so that you can look at the growing area, tagging area, and it's like all the same labels.
I know this might have nothing to do with what we've been talking about, but is there, has there been any talk about making Greenwich one area? Because a lot of guys, they come in, they move around Greenwich when Greenwich is open. So it's not just B, it's not just A, it's both. And, whatever they come in with, that's what it's tagged as, whatever they write down. Has anyone been talking about making that one area?
Well, we've talked about the combination of A and B. But
yeah.
Some of the areas are management areas, so we have to keep those separate. So that's,
no, I know 2C could stay 2C, but I would say like when 2A and 2B, if one of them closes, they both close, So like when you, I just don't, it makes it harder for dealers and for the fishermen to decide what to tag. No one's going to separate between 2A and 2B. That's the hard part. And I think your readings aren't as accurate as they could be.
And we've asked for that for a couple of years now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we totally get that. And we've gotten that feedback, and we're working on trying to merge those two. And that's part of this whole update that we're doing for all the tagging areas. So you're gonna see some of these changes incorporated into these tagging area maps and updates. And I want to set aside a meeting to present all of this to you so that we can go over it in more detail. So you know, can ask more questions and I can have the maps up so you can see what I'm talking about. Again, I just wanted to give you this as a heads up.
So we good?
I think so. I don't, Brennan,
My kid.
Jen, Brennan. And okay, Brennan, do you still have a question?
No, I'm all set. That's all I
Okay.
had to say, just about the Greenwich.
Yeah, absolutely. Nicholas, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to share with you guys real quick. The residents of Westy are very appreciative of the transplant we did down there in the fall, and they really appreciate GEM's efforts. And actually, I've had quite a few people already approach me about doing another one, and also the people in Quaney have somehow found my phone number and asked me. And they think I'm the one in control of this. So I was wondering if there was any talk about transplants in the next couple of years, or if that's kind of on hold.
That's a good question. So that's dependent upon funding. And when we get funding made available, we will definitely want to try and move forward with transplant. Just at the moment, we don't have anything coming down the pipeline, but as soon as that is a possibility, you know, we're happy to bring that into this discussion.
Just, if I may, the new regs really preclude a lot of transplants the way we used to do them.
Yeah.
Plus, thank the Shellfish too, they helped.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll tell you one thing, the people in Shelter Harbor, they're willing to give whatever funds you want. They've been begging for it.
Yeah, well, feel free to reach out to me and I can, that way I can keep you in the loop when we have anything come up.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, Katie.
All right, with that, we have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
All right, any second?
I'll second the motion.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Anna. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Have a good spring.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.